All right, 1, 2, 3. Good to see you again. I'm moderating 2 panels today, which is quite tiring, to be very honest, and I'm going to stand so I can see you all. This is a really super hot topic. I can't tell you how proud I am that IMGL MasterClass actually is hosting this event or this panel today. I don't know how much you know about IMGL. It's International Masters of Gaming Law. It's the association of lawyers, gaming lawyers worldwide. So it's a sort of an elite club of lawyers, and we have masterclass formats in different conferences, and we've been cooperating with Zoltan now for a while, so that's a big honor to be here, and thank you guys for joining me on this super hot topic about United States and Canada, North America in general, which will be probably the next year's the topic of all gaming conferences worldwide. Let me just bring you briefly some numbers so we'll understand how huge this story will be in the next years when we talk about remote gambling in North America. There's over 1,000 commercial casinos in North America right now, and they generate approximately $29 billion in revenue each year. Online sports betting is the topic in North America right now, online sports betting, but there's also other topics which we will discuss in the next 50 minutes. 38 million American adults, which is 15% of the US adult population, are planning to be on National Football League, the NFL games, this season, according to a new survey by the American Gaming Association. In Canada, a fresh report showed that at the end of the first quarter of this year, only, or just Lotto Quebec is reporting total revenues of $660 million and a consolidated net income of about $330 million. So there is a growth, a yearly growth, approximately about 25%. So we'll discuss with my distinguished guests licensing opportunities in various jurisdictions. When we talk North America, we think United States and Canada, but we have to think on the state level. Like when we say European Union, we need to talk on a member state level. Very similarly, so we're talking about various jurisdictions in United States. We're going to also kind of touch the hottest developments and the new upcoming topics which will evolve in US and Canada. And before we continue, let me just introduce briefly our distinguished panelists. Mr. Bill Pascrell III, or in industry known as BP3, is partner at Princeton Public Affairs Group from Washington, D.C. and New Jersey, and a true legend in the North American gaming industry. Mr. Andrew Cochrane is the Chief Development Officer at SBTech. Mr. Ilkim Hincer is a partner at McCarthy from Canada. And Mr. Jeremy Kleiman is a partner at the New Jersey law firm of Saiber, LLC. Welcome, guys, and thank you again for joining us today. Bill, we had a really awesome discussion at lunch. It was more politics than gaming, but those two things go very much together, don't they? So let me just, because your background, just to understand, Bill was the man in New Jersey in 2012 to introduce or to help the first online full-blown poker and casino introduced in New Jersey, and was also assisting Governor Christie at that time, all the way up to the Supreme Court case. So let us just understand what happened in 2012, what can we learn from that, and why was that such a land-breaking, I would say, time or decision for the North American market. Bill, please.
Yes, thank you, Jaka. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank IMGL. I want to thank Jeremy Kleiman for introducing me to Zoltan. And I want to tell you, Zoltan is a special human being. He's been so generous. To deal with a dodgy guy like me from Jersey is not easy. But it's a pleasure to be here. And I thank you for your hospitality and for your professionalism. There's a lot to talk about on this panel. So I've been privileged. I am not just in the casino, sports betting, lottery, horse racing industry. My firm is Princeton Public Affairs Group, based in Trenton, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. And we have a host of different industries we represent. I'm just trying to give you some context. I think the American gaming market, which encompasses all of what I just outlined, is on a meteoric rise. It is the new frontier. It's like the gold rush in America 200 plus years ago. In 2013, New Jersey was the first state in the nation to launch casino and poker, a couple of months after Delaware and Nevada attempted to get into the space very awkwardly. And it's been an interesting pathway because, as many of you know, particularly this gentleman, America's been very slow to the race, extraordinarily slow. The American operator, supplier, and punter are not that sophisticated compared to other jurisdictions outside of America, particularly Europe. So that's a criticism, if you will, or a direct analysis, but it also provides an opportunity for you all. The shortcoming of a lot of the external suppliers, operators, and affiliates, and I think Jaka has teed this up very nicely, is that many of those outside of the US think they understand politics. American politics is very different. Just like Hungarian politics is very different from the UK politics. And I guess the most important message that I could deliver today is, yes, there's tremendous opportunity in America. It's a fertile ground for all of you outside of the US. But don't come in there without understanding the political system. It's critical.
Thank you very much. And Bill, you know, we discussed earlier at lunch, and you said in 20 years or even earlier, there won't be much of that land-based casinos of Nevada and all of those jurisdictions that we discussed in those numbers that I told you at the beginning. It's going to be remote. Which state in the U.S. will be American Malta?
Well, first of all, I think that...
And I know it's a bad comparison, but still.
No, it's fair. Let me just answer the question directly. It's certainly New Jersey. And why is that? New Jersey is the first state in America in 2010, when I was working with Betfair, who many of you know, to do exchange wagering with horse racing. And New Jersey was the first state to do full-blown online casino and poker. And so in Europe, you would say big deal, right? We've been doing that forever. But what's important to know is that a governor who was planning a presidential election run took a real long shot, a Republican governor in a blue state. New Jersey's as liberal as you get.
Blue means Democrat, yeah.
Yeah, blue is Democrat.
Red is Republican.
Right, red is Republican, thank you. He took that shot, and it paid off. While he was also doing that, he teed up the sports betting initiative, which ultimately culminated in the U.S. Supreme Court on May 14th of last year, overturning PASPA, a 10-year battle. And New Jersey has now exceeded Nevada in the last 3 months in GGR on sports betting. So New Jersey is a model to be replicated throughout the country. And the reason it's so good is it has a very strong, robust, globally recognized regulatory environment. And that is why I believe New Jersey's the new Mecca for not only sports betting, but online gaming.
Is it a new Mecca not only in the U.S., but also globally?
Yeah, I think it is. I love Malta. I'll be there in a couple of weeks again. 4th time I'm there this year. I think it's a beautiful country. I love the culture. I love the prowess of Malta. And certainly the operators, many of whom are licensed in Malta, blow away any of the American operators. But I think New Jersey's regulatory regime is far more intense than the Maltese regime. If you can get licensed in New Jersey, I guarantee you, you can get licensed anywhere in the world, and certainly anywhere in America.
Europeans don't understand American politics. Well, we do, because we watch a lot of your American politics on television every day. And we
doesn't mean you understand
that doesn't mean we understand American gaming politics, though, but we understand one thing, and that is that America has states like we have member states in the European Union. So just to wrap up, Bill, with our introduction here, introduction points, is, In European Union, we see that member states, that would be states in the US, have a lot of individual power when it comes to gaming, and federal or the European Commission, it's not federal, but the European Commission has rather little. What about in the US? So if folks here want to penetrate the United States market, and of course New Jersey is leading, or one of the leading jurisdictions there, is it all state law in gaming, remote gaming? Is it going to be all state law, or is there going to be federal law? And there's elections 2020 with Mr. Trump running again, and there's Mr. Biden, who you know personally, also running next year. He is the former vice president. So tell us about the federal state gaming legislation or relations in the U.S.
Yeah, I want to be respectful of my fellow panel members. This is a question that deserves a lot of attention. I'll try to be efficient and quick. First of all, the federal government in America has regulated many different regulatory regimes to the states. For example, automobile insurance is regulated at the state level. Alcohol, for the most part, is regulated at the state level. Each state has their own patchwork of regulations. I believe that will continue. But to kind of put an exclamation point on that, so you'll remember this because I think it's important, is 10 years ago when I got into the online, I didn't know what online was in 2009. I was a brick and mortar guy. And I believe, as I told Jaka, in the next 10 to 20 years, retail, casino won't exist as we know it today, if it exists at all. But I believe that it was a foolish venture by many European online companies, many of whom I represented, who were spending $40, $50, $60 million a year to lobby Washington to pass an online gaming bill for multiple years. Remember Barney Frank? Does anybody remember that name? Congressman from Boston, Massachusetts. He sponsored the online gaming bill for a multitude of years. It never even got a committee hearing. So, and I'll wrap. I approached PokerStars and Isai Scheinberg and made a pitch to him, along with some other players who I'm not at liberty to reveal. And I said, park that money, invest in me, and we will get it done. Because in America, the states are the crucible in a democracy for experimentation. And that's where it's going to happen first. I also believe, in closing here, that many of you have talked to me over the last 4 or 5 hours about federal regulation. Meet my brethren in Washington. They will tell you, hire me because the feds are coming. The federal government can't get out of their own way in America. The Democrats and Republicans, and I'm a Democrat, cannot work together on solving the most simple problems, let alone getting into gaming, which they really have not been involved in.
Thank you so much. And I think, Andrew, this wrapping up is something we're going to continue from. Now, we're going to London now. We're Europe-based, but with extensive also experience in the U.S. market. So SBTech has been operational there for over 12 months now. And please, because, tell us as European potential operators in the U.S. market, what have you learned? What are the main challenges, for example, for a platform provider entering the U.S. market? Tell us about your experience, please.
Sure, thank you, Jaka. So first of all, thank you to Zoltan for the invitation. It's an honor to be part of the IMGL panel again this year, so thank you very much. I'm definitely not a lawyer, so I can pretty much say what I think without anyone coming after me, which is good. Yeah, so SBTech's been firmly entrenched in the US for some time now. We, as a sports betting platform provider, we actually took a bet, essentially. We took a punt on the US market a little bit earlier than perhaps some of the other major platform providers. Surprisingly earlier than some of the US platform providers, which is quite surprising. And actually, we were at G2E in Vegas, 2 years ago, talking about sports betting, where most of the casino guys were kind of looking us, frowning upon us a little bit, kind of wondering what, we'd stepped on their territory a little bit. But fast track to where we are today, and as a business, we have a variety of product solutions live in 4 US states, including New Jersey, which is obviously a hot topic, Pennsylvania, through some great assistance of Jeremy here, who's worked with the SBTech legal team. And soon we'll be in our 5th state in the state of Oregon very soon. So very much operational in the US. The question I think is about what have been the challenges. I think if you look at, if we go back 12 months and you turn around to platform providers and operators in Europe and said, hands up if you want to go into the US. You know, every single platform provider's got their hand up, operators have got their hands up. Then they start reading the regulations. Then they start realizing they need to send their bank statements in. And I think I've been asked for every flight I've been on for the last 5 years by at least one regulator. So, I mean, some people don't even know where to start with things like this. So I think it is a challenging place to do business, but it is, I think, testament for why I'm here today, say it is possible, because we're here, we're live. I'll run through a few of the challenges as I see them. I think the first one is, for us as a technology business, is exactly that, it's technology. We're a SaaS-based business, so we operate in 20 regulated markets across Europe. We offer, hosted data centers where we can serve multiple jurisdictions. But yet, you cross the Atlantic to the US and you come across something called the Wire Act, which, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm definitely not going to go into that. But essentially, we are building infrastructure on a state-by-state basis, and this is a major technology project. It requires partnerships with data center providers, people like Continent 8. It requires some senior or time of your senior IT people. And it requires deep pockets, actually. So I think that moves you on to the next challenge, which is actually about securing profitable partnerships. It's all well and good talking to a small tribal casino who wants to offer sports betting, but actually you need to understand what the commitment is from your business to enter that particular state.
Andrew, you mentioned SBTech is powering operations in 4 states in the US. I mentioned this before, states differing in European Union. How do you, from your perspective, powering operators in those 4 states differs from state to state, from local or state legislations in this case? What are the differences from your perspective?
I guess we've got a number of solutions. I mean, regulation drives the product that we can put into the market, and in Mississippi we have an on-property or retail solution with your kiosks or your self-setting betting terminals. We have a mobile on-premise solution, so essentially this is mobile betting but only within the walls of a casino. That's not something that we've ever done outside of the US, so that was very much a new product and required a lot of investment in things like geolocation technology, so you've got a lot of work on the technology side again. Back to New Jersey, where we have a gaming platform, so we're not just about sports betting, so we've had to go through the intensive regulatory development around things like payments and KYC and this kind of stuff. So I think the product varies based on regulation. Your sports betting product varies around certain features that can be allowed by certain regulators, and also things like event coverage. So in Mississippi, you're not allowed to offer certain college football, for example, or whatever it might be.
So it is very important to have a local legal representation with very much in-depth knowledge of that state. Now, just to wrap it up, now you mentioned differences between the states in United States, but if you go to comparison with the European Union, for example, or Europe in general, I don't know how deep you can go into answering this, but just let me ask you, what has SBTech done to localize the sportsbook product for the U.S. market, and how does it differ from the typical European sportsbook?
From a local, I mean, obviously you'd expect things like the US odds format and currency as pretty obvious, but I mean, it goes a bit further than that. There's specific US bet types, parlays and teasers. I mean, just to give you an example, within a casino where we have the kiosks, we've actually found that US punters actually like many more selections in their combination bet, in their parlay bet, than they do in Europe. And actually, it's actually driving the design of the kiosks, and actually, in some cases, turning them portrait to allow a punter to walk up and be able to select 30 selections without having to scroll. So things like that, at the end, the UI perspective is really important. So I think from our perspective, it's making sure that we put US sports at the focus of the sportsbook. I think that's absolutely crucial. So we've hired US traders in Las Vegas. We've got 25 people there now. We've got US prop markets. We've got investment in US trading models. So I think one misconception about the US market is that players are immature. They're not very smart. Well, actually, a lot of them have been betting offshore for some time on some pretty sharp books. And,
or in Canada, maybe.
Or not mentioning names, but So I think if you get your lines wrong, you get picked off pretty quickly, especially in New Jersey. So you've got to get this right. So a lot of investment in trading and risk management for sure.
All right, thank you so much. Jeremy, let me continue with you. Now, we've done not just the theory, also a lot of practical answers, but let's be even more practical now. So as a lawyer from New Jersey, and you have clients in this hall right here among the audience, they would come up to you with a question: what do you see as a first step for a European operator to get into the US market? Perhaps, just perhaps, maybe non-monetary social games, or just go all the way straight forward? What would you see as the first step? And forget about my non-monetary comment. That's my opinion. Maybe it's not true, but what would you suggest to your clients?
So it's funny. I had a conversation not a half hour ago about this. So my recommendation always is to allow the commercials to drive the decision. What happens is European operators and suppliers come to us, to U.S. advisors, thinking about dipping their toe in the water and entering the market, and seem to be solely focused on licensing, the regulatory regime, the infrastructure costs, all of those things, without putting any thought to whether it makes any commercial sense, right? So find a deal and run the numbers and see if you can make money, right? If there's a commercial deal to be had and it makes sense for you, then everything else, in my view, sort of falls into place, right? There's a cost, and Andrew knows this because he's lived it. There's a cost associated, a huge cost associated with entering the market. There's people costs, there's infrastructure, hardware costs. There certainly is, regulatory compliance, licensing costs, right? But if you can make that case, then worry about everything else. In my view, today, real money casino is the way to go if that's the product or service that you have. You're a little limited in the size and scope of the market. Unfortunately, online casino that we wouldn't have in the U.S. really without the efforts of Bill, I can say, in a lot of ways, has been slow to get going. New Jersey is a very robust market. The state of Pennsylvania next door just launched within the last year and is doing well, but it hasn't picked up the steam that we thought it would. As we know, online sports betting is the craze right now, and I think a lot of us in the industry believe that sports betting will be the catalyst for online casino in a lot of other states, right? For a couple of reasons. One, you have legislators and regulators that have already blessed and are regulating online and mobile sports betting. To add casino, it's just another product. And from a political point of view, and Bill's the expert, not me, I think it's a lot easier to rationalize, adding an additional game type, if you will, rather than viewing it as an expansion of gambling. So for that reason, I think sports betting will be a catalyst for casino.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. I'll come back to you with another question, but I'll just go to Canada now. And last but not least, Canada. It's always about this. There's this saying, "Blame Canada for everything." We were discussing that earlier, but Canada. I have a theory why, because it's so hard to find anything bad about Canada. So if there's anything bad about Canada, everybody says, "Oh, Canadians," But anyway, Canada. Ilkim, it's kind of a let's say general question, just to give us a broad perspective of Canada here. What are the most exciting news or happenings or developments in the horizon in Canada right now? Just kind of give us the picture of Canadian market and where it's going to develop in this area.
So thank you. I think that in response to your first comment, though, I think it's all because we're super, super polite. I think we're known to apologize.
The most polite prime minister.
We have a very polite prime minister as well. So no disrespect to anyone else, but we apologize about everything, even when we. So
That's what I say. Blame Canada and then apologize.
And I'm sorry about taking up all this time, making that comment. In terms of Canada and what's exciting about Canada, we have a lot of similarities with really how gaming exists, just a framework with our cousins south of the border, who are also usually extremely polite. Not as polite, but But there are very, very significant nuances and differences that I think I'll sort of highlight that sort of lead into my answer. Ultimately, the jurisdictional split between what the federal government is responsible for and what the provinces in Canada are responsible for goes back to 1985, when the federal government itself removed itself, for all intents and purposes, from the gaming space for more or less a one-time payment to pay for the Calgary Olympics. But anyway, I won't talk about the economic sense of that deal. But so in essence, the provinces themselves really have the mandate to regulate and operate gaming in Canada. And that creates both an opportunity and a challenge sometimes, just depending on where we are. And one of the things that's happened over the decades is, although we've developed expertise, we've maintained what we call a conduct and manage model, which translates into the government being both a regulator and the oversight body, so an operator as well as a regulator. In the landscape, primarily that relates back to the bricks and mortars reality. In Canada, you may not be aware, but all gaming collectively amounts to about a $16 billion industry, and about 52% of that is land-based gaming, land-based casino gaming. But what's exciting today is, and I didn't think this would happen in my lifetime, frankly, after a few years of frustrations and some lobbying efforts on many fronts, what's being talked about now is online gaming. Online gaming is available through the government oversight bodies across almost every province. Not every province does it, but some provinces, most provinces do, although they haven't been necessarily very successful in tapping into that vertical, and they capture a very small portion of the market to date, less than 20% in Ontario and much smaller in the other provinces, and Ontario being the biggest market. What's being talked about now, and the Ontario government made this announcement earlier this year, is an actual realignment of how gaming delivery may be presented in Canada, and actually tapping the expertise of the private sector and launching a licensing model in Ontario. And hopefully it'll translate into something that goes beyond Ontario as well. But there's literally now a process going on that in essence is a consultation on what that model ought to look like. The government in Ontario has indicated it wants to embrace the future, finally. The criminal code at a high level that governs the high level prohibitions on gaming predates the advent of this thing called the internet. I think finally the governments have established that they ought to acknowledge this thing called the internet, and they acknowledge that the events going on in the US, like what's happened with PASPA, have been very impactful. And offshore gaming is available and has been available in Canada for some time, to the tune of the estimates varying from $1.2 to $2.2 billion per annum. And in 5 years, we estimate that number will be over $6 billion. So the government of Ontario, I'll give it full credit, has decided to, first of all, consult on and then build a model with a view to launching a licensed and taxed regime, not going through the old model, the heavy-handed conduct and manage government model, as early as early 2020. Now, we all know that these things can take a lot longer than we want, but all that to say, if you were to ask me a couple of years ago, will online gaming through the private sector, through a licensing and taxing regime, ever happen in my lifetime? I would have sort of laughed and had a shot of whiskey and said, well, you know, let's toss a coin. Now, I am very confident that that will happen in Canada in 2020.
Thank you so much, Ilkim. I'll just go briefly back to you, Jeremy, and then we're going to go back this way. Let's just touch the affiliates opportunities in the U.S. just briefly. I think this is pretty interesting here also for the audience. What are the affiliates opportunities in the U.S. right now? Just briefly, please.
Sure. When the New Jersey market first opened, the regulation contemplated affiliates, obviously, and nobody came to the dance. Very few came. The reason is there was a licensing regime for affiliates that I think didn't exist, or probably doesn't exist in many, many other markets. And so we had this irony where many, if not most, of the experienced affiliates from Europe and other parts of the world were essentially excluded from the market because there was concern that they wouldn't be able to get licensed because of other markets that they operated in. So I think over time, the regulator sort of realized that the industry really wasn't going to grow unless it was more accommodating, I would say, to affiliates. So there still is a licensing requirement depending on the economics of your arrangement with the operators. But the affiliate market is starting to grow. Now we're sort of seeing, phase two, which is what I've seen is affiliates, particularly with the advent of sports betting, coming up with creative ways to do business. So what we're seeing now is a lot of affiliates are structuring exclusive arrangements with, with restaurant and pub chains where they have exclusive rights to, control all of the screens in the bar or restaurant, and also have an exclusive arrangement with an operator to essentially use the restaurants and bars as a way to register players. And so the non-affiliates, the restaurants, and the bars and pubs are now effectively, because of a rev share arrangement with the affiliate, they've effectively become affiliates themselves. And some do need to get licensed. But that's what we're seeing now is, the market's starting to get a little crowded on the affiliate side, and how do you compete? You can only do so much on social media, so affiliates are coming up with these creative partnerships offline to boost their revenue. So
can I ask you as a lawyer just a sub-question, which is nothing to do with Canada and the U.S., don't get me wrong, it's just a comparison to what we have in the European Union here with Malta and other jurisdictions, for example. What happens if a Canadian casino is offering games to American players? What are the repercussions of that? What are the consequences? Were there any cases? I read somewhere online there was a big dilemma, a big issue about this, about American players being offered, to play in Canadian casinos. Well, what happens in that case? How does American government act in such cases?
It really does very little. So let's be practical, right? So from a practical point of view, what will happen is the state regulators in places like Pennsylvania and New Jersey, trying to protect their market, will send a demand notice or a cease and desist letter to an operator outside of the jurisdiction, be it in Canada or somewhere else offshore, basically saying, you are violating our laws, please stop soliciting our residents. That's about it, right? It becomes a jurisdictional problem.
Okay, nothing more. What about if you go to the U.S. then, or you have some operations in the U.S.? Is there any repercussions then for a Canadian company, operator?
You mean crossing the border?
Or having done business or bank accounts or anything in America?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, yes. I'm not aware of recent, in the last few years, where there's been a crackdown. Anyone's been, stopped at the border. Obviously,
I'm saying this because every single European online casino is very strict about putting in general terms or any other papers, do not do anything with the U.S. Is this huge where everybody's so afraid about even mentioning U.S. in any general terms of doing business or any privacy policy. And I was just wondering what happens, because everybody in the EU is super frightened about American government. So you say nothing happens. I'm sorry, I mean, this is really, because we have this issue all the time when we think about America, and people are thinking now about going to America to do business there. What happens? What happens if you do, for example, offer from Canada to American players some services? Nothing, you said.
yeah, I mean,
Okay, good.
basically nothing.
Good, all right, okay. Yeah, please, yeah, go ahead.
May I come in on that? Obviously, Jeremy's well placed in this industry, but I'm going to take the lawyer hat off. I'm not playing lawyer here. It's interesting. You cannot place a bet if you live in New York, in New Jersey, online. So what happened on Super Bowl Sunday? Folks were riding their bicycles and walking across the George Washington Bridge to come into New Jersey to place their bet on their mobile. And as a matter of fact, a couple of mates of mine opened up hot dog stands in Fort Lee on the other side of the bridge and took advantage of that wonderful American entrepreneurial spirit. But I will say this, because I think you're scratching your heads. The regulators are watching during the licensing process your past history. If you have AML issues, you're not getting licensed. If you took US bets in your past history, it will be a challenge to get licensed. So, it's interesting that the American government, the federal government, and this silly Wire Act, which is a fraud that the Trump administration propagated on the industry, which did have a chilling effect. Not for smart folks like Andrew and his company, but others. It did have a chilling effect. Many European companies were very reluctant to get into the space because not understanding why is the president of the United States and the Trump administration putting out a reinterpretation of prior law, the Justice Department interpretation. But I'll tell you this. So if you're a New Yorker, you're afraid to put a bet across the lines because you're going to be in violation of the Wire Act or some other silliness is going to happen. I'm not even sure the federal government would even know how to enforce it. But you know, there's an interesting gentleman in America called Sheldon Adelson, the owner of the Sands, who's watching for that geolocation breach. Every day. It hasn't happened yet, but he's watching because he wants to pounce. But the American government is not doing anything, the federal government, about bets that are coming in to other jurisdictions like Canada and like the Caribbean and like Europe and Malta and Gibraltar and the rest of them. Isn't that interesting? It's a head scratcher. And it is the big criticism of American government when they put up this big badge but do nothing about it. But I'm telling you, if you're licensed in New Jersey, you're going to be very careful about what you're doing in other jurisdictions because that license could be pulled at any time.
I mentioned that question because there's many member states in European Union, including Slovenia, that say if you take Slovenian bets on Maltese casinos, you're never going to get a license in Slovenia like you would want one, but you're never going to get one if you do that, if Maltese casinos take Slovenian bets, and it's on a weekly basis now. Andrew, for you, and then I would like everybody else to elaborate on this question also. I read when I was preparing for the panel, and there was a recent event in the United States where they actually emphasized this very much, is the question of games of skill versus games of chance. There's a big discussion in the US about that. For example, poker, where to position poker. Now, how is that affecting from your perspective, from your business perspective? How is this dilemma about what is game of skill and what is game of chance in the US affecting your business model? What are your thoughts on that? And then I would like some legal insights on that also, please.
Sure. It's a complicated question, and it's a question that us as a business were not prepared to answer. So essentially, we did the sensible thing, I think, an expensive thing, but that's deploy experts. So I think the message here is about coming into the US market is fundamentally different to every other market we've been in, certainly as a business in the last 10 years. You know, we have a lawyer in every state. We have a consultant in every state. We have people advising us on the political landscape on a state-by-state basis. And I think, you know, questions like this need to be answered by people who understand US law and understand US regulatory frameworks far better than our own in-house legal team. So I think, I mean, you've got the right people on the panel to perhaps offer a more expert opinion, but I mean, from our perspective, we're making sure we're offering products and services that absolutely, you know, comply with the regulations, that are not in any way are pushing boundaries. There was an interesting panel earlier today around innovation versus compliance. Certainly, you know, most platform companies really push the boundaries around in this area. I think when it comes to the US, it's the complete opposite. It's compliance and compliance only, really. A lot of exciting in-play betting features that we have are not live because the New Jersey regulator, you know, doesn't want to rush into offering all of these in-play, you know, cash-out functionality or request-a-bet type products. So you have to take a very cautionary approach, and certainly that's the advice that we've been given by lawyers across the US so far.
Thank you so much, Bill. Ilkim, Jeremy, your elaboration on that issue, on that question?
Yeah, I would just say that, look, the US is 50 separate countries. You have to view it that way. And the laws are different in every place. And If you are licensed by a gaming regulator, then you are under their jurisdiction, and they have discretion and control over you, regardless of what the product is. Having said that, if you're not licensed as a gambling company and you have a skill-based product that you want to offer, some states you can, some states you cannot. Every state has a different definition of the tipping point between chance and skill, right? Some states apply something called the predominance test. If you're staking something of value and the level of chance outweighs the skill involved and you can win a prize, then that's gambling. Some states apply a completely different test, the any chance test. If it's essentially a skill-based game, but there's one scintilla of chance involved in the outcome, that's gambling. And if you're not licensed, it's illegal. There are other states that Louisiana and I think Texas come to mind, that their definition under their criminal law makes no distinction between skill and chance. So if you're not licensed, effectively if you're not a casino, right, in a place like Louisiana, and you offer any type of game where you're placing a bet or staking something of value and a prize is involved, it doesn't matter. It can be 100% skill. It's illegal. So, Andy's right. It's complicated and you need expert advice in every state.
Exactly. Bill, please.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody in the room is familiar with poker. How many people think poker's a skill game? Raise your hand. Of course it's a skill game. And how many people know what Black Friday is? Oh, this is great. You ask what Black Friday is in America, they look at you like, oh, it's the day after Thanksgiving when everybody goes shopping. They don't know what Black Friday is. I was in Malta Black Friday when my BlackBerry, remember those, blew up. Because many of my clients were indicted by the U.S. Justice Department and shut down. PokerStars being one of them, for taking poker online. Criminal indictment by the U.S. Justice Department. In my opinion, and it was by the Obama Justice Department, and I am a Democrat, ridiculous that Esai Sheinberg had to sell that company because of that indictment. Ridiculous. Welcome to America.
Thank you so much. Before we go to questions, just one last elaboration. We can say, and you said that, Bill, at your opening remarks, we can say that we have somehow matured in Europe in many ways when we talk about remote gambling. And North America is here very much following European developments. What have you honestly learned, bad and good, from European legislative and practical development of this remote gambling market? What can Americans learn that we have done wrong and what we have done good in Europe? What do you think?
Again, I'll be very direct and I'll be short for a change. I think the European operators and suppliers have incredible technology and sophistication. Conversely, I think they're very unsophisticated when it comes to, not across the board, but I think Andrew hit the nail on the head, when it comes to understanding American politics. Just because I read the newspaper today and read a little bit about the Hungarian political system, I don't understand it. And so you need boots on the ground for people to interpret that. And that's important and it's critical. So I think there's a lot to learn. I think Andrew's experience and comments about the U.S. punter, I still feel, I think Andrew's being extremely polite, as well as our friends from Canada. I think the American punter, in mass, on average, the mean, is very unsophisticated. Hasn't a clue about some of the exotics, exchange wagering, et cetera, that is provided in Europe for a very long time. But I love when there's a cross, when companies come in and they understand the one thing they need to understand better is the American political system, because everything else, I think they're far superior than the U.S.
Thank you so much. Anybody else wants to elaborate on that, please?
I think certainly for us,
Briefly.
very briefly, we secured a wonderful contract with the Oregon State Lottery, which in its early weeks was a great success. And then you realise the full potential of the US system, really, the political landscape and the competitive landscape of US companies. And I think certainly it's been an amazing, sharp learning curve for SBTech. You know, we've had government officials in Oregon saying, you know, jobs are going to Bulgaria because that's where, you know, SBTech has 600-700 people. You know, we've got 200 people in Kiev. You know, you face these kind of challenges. You know, it's a very unknown environment to operate in. So, and again, having the right people to advise you, and I'll include PR agencies alongside all the other professional services that we have. You need to be ready, and you've got to be tough as well.
Thank you so much. Jeremy, please.
Yeah, I'm going to take a different angle. I think that the advantage that everyone in this room has is that if you're operating in Europe, it's in your DNA. You understand that this is a technology business, online casino, online sports betting. The U.S. regulator doesn't quite understand that it's an e-commerce business. It's in many ways a completely different animal than what they've been regulating for years, you know, slot machines in a casino. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's one of the good. That's probably the one advantage you have, is that you can, coming into the market with the right local advisors, you can educate the regulators and make them understand how you do business, how it's different than what they're used to in the U.S. You have to understand that they're used to, you know, regulating U.S. companies. They've gotten better over the last few years, sort of understanding the dynamics of European companies and non-U.S. business people, but it's still an education process.
Thank you so much. Ilkim, please.
Yeah, I'll echo all those sentiments and sort of harken back to something that I think one of the earlier panels discussed at great length, which was compliance for the sake of compliance, and compliance starving or killing innovation, and it's not exactly something that a lot of folks in North America are. It's not part of their DNA, shall we say, in looking at that in the proper way. And I think in Europe, the European history has evolved in a way, the gaming industry has evolved in a way that you do think about that, and no one does it perfectly, obviously, and that's pretty clear, but you do it better than I think we certainly do it in Canada. You look at opportunities for efficiency and innovation, and we are learning to do that in the online space in Canada. And what I would say is you have an opportunity if you come to Canada, and again, I suspect a lot of the same things applies to our cousins south of the border, but you have an opportunity to teach this concept to the Canadian regulators and the Canadian government and the Canadian operators. You have an opportunity to say, put innovation aside, and I hate to say that, but for the sake of a viable, sustainable business, you have an opportunity to say, this is how the model ought to be. This is what the tax rate ought to be. This is what the controls need to be for a sustainable business. We listen in Canada. We are listening in Canada, and we will build that into our DNA. And I think you bring your history and ability to look at that, and I think that would be a huge advantage you have over us trying to figure this stuff out. Looking at laws that are based on 12th century Elizabethan laws that predate the internet, which is to me still insane.
Thank you so much, guys. We're opening the panel for a few questions, please. Is there anybody who wants to ask? Please go ahead.
Thank you. As you pointed already out, and I was also actively in the development and industry, and now I'm working for GLI, that's a testing lab. So I know the situation in the US and also in Canada quite well from the casino perspective, land-based, or online, or as you pointed out already, the US are actually developed behind Europe. My question is, Mississippi actually did an interesting thing, to my opinion, and was the first jurisdiction that technically merged online and land-based technologies by allowing sports betting terminals. I know that certain companies in the industry this including myself, were already involved in developing land-based products based on online technology. And the interesting point is that actually the US with server-based gaming, so video lottery terminal systems actually initialized a connected form of client-server systems. Actually, Italy was the first market in Europe taking over that technology and that technical regulation. VLT systems are now getting more and more popular also in European jurisdictions. But actually, the VLT systems are like the electromechanical typing machine in the history of development. So for me, it's a little bit I do not understand why Mississippi, for example, made that. So that's one important step, but why it's not still included with the VLT systems and other slot machine content.
Who would you like to ask? Who would like to answer that question?
Actually, Bill, I think, but also it's
more
a question into the round.
So briefly, 16, 17 years ago, I was the lobbyist for the Casino Association, the brick and mortar. And they retained me to lobby the governor and the government of New Jersey to give the horse tracks a subsidy of $30 million US a year, just talking about Jersey right now for a minute before I get to Mississippi, in exchange for a commitment, 10-year deal, that the tracks wouldn't get VLTs. That's insanity. But I was a part of the retail casino industry. I think Mississippi, and you have to understand, Mississippi is very different from New Jersey. People say, well, we all speak the same language, maybe the dialect or the accent's a little different. Politically, it's like night and day. Look at the margin of victory for our president in Mississippi, 30-plus point plurality, to his loss in New Jersey. And so a lot of American states are not embracing online yet for a host of reasons, including the very veiled attempt by the Trump administration to shut it down with the Wire Act reinterpretation. Mississippi will get there, but it's not going to get there anytime soon.
But you think that also in the future scenario, let's say the next 5 years, we will also see VLTs possibly run on a online platform, because technically it's actually a short step.
Yeah, I think what has more power to bring online into other jurisdictions is what Jeremy and Andrew talked about previously, the launch of sports betting. I mean, 19 states now have a lead. That will be the impetus, not VLTs. VLTs, and I get it, I get your comment, I'm not a tech guy, but VLTs are not going to be the pathway forward to online gaming in America.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we ran out of time. I just have one more question for Bill and Jeremy. I'm sorry. Who's going to win in 2020?
Well, if you go, I believe...
Short answer.
I think it's a 60% chance Donald Trump will get elected, although I'm not voting for him.
Okay, thank you.
Sadly, I agree.
All right. So please, let's thank our panelists for this really interesting panel. Thank you, guys. It was great, and have a lovely time on. Thank you so much.